Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the fourth panel in today's session, today's program. I hope you had a wonderful break, a wonderful lunch. And now it's time to grab your coffee, to be very awake with, because we are going to start a very engaging, a very fun, and a very, of course, interesting panel. It's in-car audio. Can radio dominance last forever? And I think we can all relate to that because we love listening to radio, music, or whatever our favorite shows are in the car. But to talk about that, we have wonderful experts. Laurence Harrison, Director of Automotive Partnerships at Radioplayer. Welcome, Laurence.
Hi, Cecilia. Hi, everyone.
Joe D'Angelo, Senior VP of Broadcast Radio at Xperi.
Hi, everyone.
And Jacqueline Bierhorst, Vice President at World DAB. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you. And hi, everybody.
Yes, it's really good to have you here. And for those who are in the audience, you are very, very seasoned speakers. You've been together like in many, many panels. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion. And I'm going to start by asking Laurence something very general. I mean, not only Laurence, the three of you might give your perspective from your place in the industry. What's the landscape right now of in-car audio? Because there are many technological transformations and also many customer habits also are changing. Laurence, you can start.
Thanks, Cecilia, and again, hello to everyone. What I might do is just briefly explain who Radioplayer is for those that don't know us.
Please.
Radioplayer is probably a quite unique organisation in this space. We're a non-profit organisation, and we are owned and supported and funded solely by radio broadcasters. So we were founded 10 years ago now in the UK, and actually we're celebrating our 10th birthday this year, which you can see on the background here. The way we work is, the way we're structured, just very quickly, is that in each market that we represent, when we're in 14 countries now, 13 of those are in Europe, and in each of those countries, the radio broadcasters will come together, form a collaborative organisation with public service and commercial radio broadcasters, and then they become part of the Radioplayer worldwide family. And we do have apps and web players and so on, but our main focus now, our main aim on behalf of radio broadcasters is to keep radio strong in the car. So to your question, Cecilia, what we mean by that, and our main aim here, is about the radio button. So this is the core radio broadcast experience in the car. And for us, we firmly believe that has to be broadcast radio, FM, DAB, and other formats around the world at its heart. And we want it to be a hybrid experience. And that means broadcast radio working with the internet to create a much richer experience. So that's our aim. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. In terms of the landscape, it's really interesting because what we see is a dramatically changing automotive world, which brings with it challenges which we like to look at as opportunities. So things like the introduction of electric cars, and that brings new innovation because new electric car manufacturers have a kind of blank canvas when it comes to design. Connectivity, 5G, some of the bigger tech giants entering the automotive space, and I know we're going to talk about that. And a changing dashboard, so screens are getting bigger, they're getting higher definition, so the visual experience of radio needs to be great. So we're working in spaces to address all of those challenges. But I think the final thing I'll say, and we may come back to this as well, we should remember that radio is in an incredibly strong place now in the dashboards of today. So there are various bits of research out there. I know the last piece that I saw, for example, across Europe, there's some Edison research, infinite dial, and taking Germany as an example, amongst adults who listen to audio, 78% of them listen to radio, and that's against kind of 15% who listen to podcasts. And the BBC have got some research coming out soon which shows similar numbers. So they're a position of strength, but there are challenges and opportunities that radio needs to react to.
Joe, please go ahead. What's your perspective from how do you see the landscape of in-car audio right now from your experience at Xperi?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So I'll do what Laurence did and give a little background on Xperi, because it's probably a company, a name at least, it's not very familiar to the audience. Xperi is a relatively new brand or name for a long legacy of technology companies. In our portfolio, we have technologies like DTS audio, which is very prominent in film and music. We have the HD radio system, which is the digital radio system here in the US. And then recently we just merged with TiVo, which has a rich music metadata catalog and really a lot of expertise around personalization recommendation. So where I sit within that organization, I run our broadcast radio business. And to date, we have actually supported and licensed technology to over 7,000 broadcast radio stations around the world. We are the app partner with Radioplayer, so we build the apps for them. And then we also work very closely with the automotive ecosystem. We have technology in about 100 million cars around the world, working with all the tier one suppliers in the supply chain. So we're very close to kind of the technology and implementation of both radio and audio services in the car. And I'll echo what Laurence said, that radio is still very dominant in the car. It's the largest consumed audio medium in the vehicle, but it is clearly under threat. We see a lot of enabling technologies like CarPlay and Android for Auto coming into the car that's making it easier for consumers to bring their digital audio services into the vehicle, and those numbers are really growing. And then we see moves even at a deeper level at the operating system level with Android Automotive, where they're not only trying to enable consumers to bring in technology and services, but they're actually embedding in the vehicle the platform and the services in what they would call a native implementation. So the dash is changing rapidly. There are more competitive threats. One of the benefits that radio has is it's an aggregated platform. You know, you turn on the radio, you get all the local stations in your market. We still have fragmentation now with these digital services where you bring it in and you have to start up the Spotify app and then go to Pandora. And then, you know, the app environment is not quite as integrated as radio. And so I'll echo what Laurence said about the importance of hybrid radio, bringing radio together to take advantage of IP connectivity in the car on terms that preserve the broadcast radio experience are not only very important, but provide an amazing opportunity for broadcast radio to compete against these new technologies and services that are coming in. So radio is still very strong. It's under threat, but radio is definitely not standing still. There's a ton of innovation going on.
Thank you, Joe. And Jacqueline, you are the Vice President of World DAB, and that's becoming relevant also to keep radio as a main source of company, basically, in the car. Tell us, first of all, what's World DAB, and what's your vision? What's your vision of the landscape of in-car audio right now?
Thank you, Cecilia. Well, firstly, indeed, World DAB, it's a global industry body. It's a forum for DAB digital radio. And that is FM radio, but then digital. So that's a very easy to explain thing. And World DAB facilitates the adoption and implementation of broadcast digital radio based on DAB+. And this digital radio standard is adopted by broadcasters across Europe, Asia Pacific and beyond. And that is because we as broadcasters, that's my background also in the Netherlands. I work for all the broadcasters, both public and private. World DAB delivers tailored solutions and advices on all aspects of the switchover from analog to digital radio. and then focused on DAB, because digital radio is of course broader. You already heard hybrid radio, it's IP and DAB, it's all together. But we as World DAB think it's necessary for the entire chain, from chip manufacturers to OEMs, to broadcasters, to regulators, technical people. We have a lot of champions within our group for over 40, 50 countries. And we can share knowledge. And that's what we do here. So we have groups within World DAB, especially on automotive, on user experience, collaborating with parties like Radioplayer or Xperi. So we always try to collaborate, because collaboration is the key of a successful transformation of the old radio as a medium, which is absolutely vivid and thriving, due to the fact that it's digitizing momentarily, and it's a wonderful time to work in this broadcast industry. So if you look at the landscape, it is indeed changing, and I think Joe and Laurence already said nearly everything on what's happening on screens. And looking at the broadcasters, it's very important to be aware what you need to change as broadcasters, and you need to do that based on standards. So we also work on standard-based, like radio DNS for hybrid radio, to combine broadcast with metadata. And you will hear that further down today's conversation, I think. But that is something that we need to make broadcasters aware of, and they are aware, but the entire chain need to do and work along the same side. So radio might be under threat, as it has happened before in the last 100 years of its existence. But the fact that it exists 100 years doesn't make it less important, because it touches the heart. That is something that radio does. It touches the heart of people, and especially in the COVID times, we've seen it as well. If you're lonely, you're less lonely, because there's somebody on that radio that absolutely knows how to talk to you, so you feel connected. And that's that connectivity. Whether that is through DAB or FM or IP, it will be digital in the future. So FM will be phased out at least in Europe, in the course of time. But radio will still be there, and some stations will absolutely thrive, and some stations will do less. They will develop podcasts more and more. They will develop other ways of offering their content. And that is why Xperi and Radioplayer are so important, because they can help in getting that content out there on those screens in an easy way for consumers to get it. You know, if you want it now, and you want easy navigation. And therefore, we need each other. So that's my vision for now.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Yeah, please. I think Laurence was saying, yeah.
I was just going to build on what Jackie was saying there, and I think this is useful in the general context of, certainly in the European market, is just the growth of DAB+. So, you know, Joe and I both mentioned hybrid radio, and we'll talk a bit more, but FM and DAB+ in Europe, at the heart of that, is really, really important. And what we've seen over the last few years is amazing growth and take-up of DAB+ across Europe, certainly in some of the major car markets. If you look at UK, Germany, and what's really important is now that France is about to launch its first national service on DAB+, which is, you know, is extremely helpful. And alongside that, new cars that come with DAB+ as standard have also been growing really quickly. And there's now a new regulation, the European Electronic Communications Code. And what this means is that as of the end of last year, new cars, where there's an intention to provide a radio service, need to have DAB+ as standard. So for car manufacturers, and certainly for us looking to build a hybrid radio solution around broadcast, that's transformative, and that's incredibly helpful, because we think that's the right way to go.
Laurence, actually, I was going to ask you, well, this is a lot of transformation. It's something that it's ongoing and it's always growing and changing. But have you faced resistance? There are radios or radio owners or institutions that are not really believing a lot in making this change, because they think, well, we have thrived or we have been successful the way we are why should we change? Have you faced that kind of discussion or resistance from some broadcasters?
Well, I should say that our, just to give another, again, a bit more context, our partnership model is, we collaborate and work with car manufacturer partners, provide them with official metadata and other services. And we've got two existing customers, VW Group and BMW Group, who are fantastic partners and firmly believe in the future of radio and broadcast radio. I think there's certainly been some car manufacturers that have, I suspect, questioned the need for putting DAB+ in as standard. But the numbers that we see across Europe in terms of new cars with DAB+ as standard, now at the end of last year, I think it was 80% of new cars across Europe came with DAB+ and standard. And as we move through this year and that directive is implemented, that will continue to grow. I think it's true that within the car manufacturers, there are sort of new digital teams forming. And in those digital teams, there may be less history with radio and more of a slant towards an IP future. But as I said, we firmly believe that, and this is about consumer, I think it's about consumer benefit. When you've got a really established technology like DAB+ and FM with fantastic coverage, it's free to air as well, and you're creating a rich experience with the internet, that's actually better for the consumer. That's the best experience currently for the consumer. And it's just about getting that message across.
Yeah, there will be next week, there's an automotive event organized by World DAB, and more than 400 participants will be participating from OEMs to broadcasters and all in the chain involved. And BBC, for example, will do a presentation on threats of connected cars, but also opportunities. So that's an important study that has been done. And you just asked if broadcasters feel a little bit terughoudend, don't know the English word.
Resistant or...
Yes, resistant,
yeah.
Exactly, for going into DAB. That depends per country. What you see mostly throughout Europe is that most of them, both public and private broadcasters, collaborate and embrace it and know and see it as the future, as part of hybrid radio and its importance. And that is also, there are lots of researches done to show that DAB is still very necessary next to IP. And 5G is not the solution for that big amount of numbers of listeners. So, but there are some, especially commercial broadcasters, for example, that in some countries that still are reluctant because they have an FM license and they have less competition on FM than you have on DAB because there's more place for more competition. So you need to have the courage and the vision to do it. But it's changing, and what you see mostly, and I can say mostly, is more than 90% of all broadcasters is collaborating on this, and is even the driving force behind digital radio organizations like the Netherlands, like Belgium, Maradio and Flanders, or Germany, or Italy, or France, or UK. Broadcasters are driving it, so they are behind it 100%.
Yeah, I think it's, if I could comment from both perspectives, I think Europe is in a very fortunate position with regards to the transition to digital, because you have the support of the European Parliament with the regulation, you have organizations like World DAB, and you really have an engaged broadcast community that is driving this forward. When you look around the rest of the world, there is a lot of hesitancy from broadcasters, especially in developing markets, where they're looking at the status quo and saying, why do I really have to change? And I think if you put some of those broadcasters in vehicles that are being manufactured today, it would be a real aha, a wake-up moment. But they really have to see what they're up against in the car. Broadcast strength is its localism and its diversity. That's also a weakness when you're going up and competing against, say, a Spotify that is a global solution, very efficient for content discovery, content availability. It's a very different dynamic. And I think once broadcasters see what the competition is, then they need to look at the digital solutions that are available to them, both broadcast and IP, and make sure they're taking full advantage of them. DAB is an incredibly robust and flexible technology that offers a great toolkit to broadcasters. And broadcasters should be embracing every component of that service on their way to a hybrid radio future. But it is a real challenge to kind of get that education and create that context of awareness on both sides, the broadcasters and the car companies, and the role that Radioplayer, WorldDAB, and Xperi play in advocating for technology enhancements with both broadcasters and OEMs, I think is critical.
Are there numbers? I don't know, maybe you don't know, or any of you, if you can answer me, if those numbers exist. How do broadcasters who fully embrace technology and this model are doing, and how the other ones who are a bit behind or more reluctant are doing, and the comparison, or these are doing better, you should do this too. Are there results to show?
Sorry, go on, Joe.
No, I honestly don't have the statistics. I think Jacqueline and Laurence might, but I would look at Norway, right, for their transition. It's probably a good benchmark.
Yeah, I think like Joe, I don't have any specific numbers, but I know that through WorldDAB, there's been various case studies about how broadcasters have used the opportunities that digital and DAB present. And again, if you look at the UK, one of the ways in which some of the broadcasters here, especially commercial broadcasters, have used the potential for DAB is to create more choice. And that's at the heart of the consumer benefit. So you'll have numerous brand spin-offs. And because DAB and DAB Plus listenership has reached that critical mass, there's now an opportunity to really make money. So I know from a UK perspective, there's now around 17 million listeners, people listen to services in the UK that are outside of what was available on analog before. So that really shows that explosion in choice is offering up and is engaging an audience that otherwise the broadcasters wouldn't have been able to engage. And of course, our commercial radio broadcasts will be very well adept at monetizing that. So I don't have any figures, but I think there's enough evidence out there to show that the flexibility and the additional choice that DAB Plus offers does create monetization opportunities.
Yeah, I can echo on that. In the Netherlands, for example, there's a new layer, a national layer that will be auctioned next week. That will mean that commercial broadcasters have the opportunity to expand their stations, their number of stations, and that already happened with the layer that we started in 2013. And compared to FM, there's much more choice, so more channels, and listening of and it's old and young technique at the same time, and DAB Plus. It's there for a while, but it's not there for long in the Netherlands. It's only 6-7 years now, technically. FM took a lot longer to be successful, and that's the funny part of this discussion also, because FM took decades before it became a success, because AM was the way that people wanted to listen to radio, and that there was a change. They all thought, oh no, not on my time, because it's not necessary. Well, it is. We have 13.2 million listeners a week to radio, and 11% of them listen through DAB+. And some stations that do not have good FM coverage, that percentage is much, much higher. Yeah. That can be 50% or 60% combined with IP, for example. So yeah, it is relevant.
And I think one of the, if I can kind of add a topic onto this conversation, I think with this proliferation of choice, you're also beginning to recognize the importance of metadata, the descriptive information that allows your station to be basically identified. If you think back of the old days of analog, you would find a radio station by tuning up the dial, sitting there for a minute, listening to what's playing, and then making your decision of whether you want to stay with it. That's really not a modern audio user experience. Today, consumers expect to be presented with an accurate list of all the content that's available to them, whether it's on a home TV platform or on a digital audio platform. And with the proliferation of choice on DAB and HD radio, you may have 70 to 100 broadcast audio programs available to you in a market. And to efficiently navigate that, you really need rich metadata that in many cases will be delivered over hybrid. So for this audience, it's not just programming the audio, but it's describing the audio so that it's discoverable and it's engaging.
We are already 20 minutes into our session. That's half, and it's gone very, very fast as expected. So if you're in the audience and you are interested in asking something, anything relevant, something that you really want our speakers to answer, please do. And in the last 5 minutes of the session, we will ask them your questions. So please do send your question to our speakers. Actually, you just went ahead because that was going to be my next question, Joe. Why metadata is so important for digital radio in the car? That's a question actually that's on the website of World DAB. So, well, you can all answer that from your perspective.
Well, I can certainly add to what Joe said there, and of course he's absolutely right. I think we mentioned at the start when we were just talking about the general landscape in automotive that what we're seeing now is that the dashboard screens are getting bigger, they're getting high resolution, and there's an opportunity there for stations to really bring their brand to life on the car dashboard. So what organisations like Radioplayer and Xperi do is help to provide that sort of official broadcaster metadata directly through to the dashboard. So that's station logos, station information, station name, and it may be more dynamic metadata such as artist, track now playing, and so on, and potentially artist images and other things. And that really does bring it to life. Now, there's a question over driver distraction, which we can come back to, but that's now an essential part, I think, of the dashboards of the future. And that metadata is absolutely key for broadcasters to provide in partnership with organisations like Radioplayer to try and bring that about. The one thing I would say, and this might be a nice segue to Jackie and World DAB, is that one of the things that we are very clear about with our automotive partners is that a good hybrid radio system should always look to broadcast and DAB+ first for the metadata that's available there. And there are many good reasons that you do that related to the ease of access and the memory use in the system and things like that. So actually trying to make sure that the metadata is available over DAB+ first, and then only look to supplement that from IP if you can't find it on DAB+, is really, really important. And World DAB has been doing a great job of running a campaign, certainly amongst their broadcasters, to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly what what I described earlier. We have working groups, and out of those working groups come beautiful materials that we can share with the broadcasters or with the partners where it's relevant for. And there's a lot of the user experience group of World DAB is a group that did a lot of research in many countries. And that helped us and OEMs and our partners to understand what the listener needs in the car. Because as I said earlier, Spotify is one company, can talk to an OEM and it looks beautiful. But we're thousands of broadcasters, we're with thousands, and we're all competitors. So if we do not do it the same way, nobody will understand at the OEMs what's happening there. So therefore, it's very important that we have one vision on that, and that one vision is created through collaboration and partnerships and research and effort of all the different countries and all the different chain members from chip manufacturers to antenna manufacturers to OEMs to broadcasters to all involved. And that makes it so rich. And from that perspective, we have in our project office a team that can do campaigning towards broadcasters and give information through either directly or either through country managers of digital radio organizations.
Yeah, and I think it's also very important and kind of a call to action to the broadcast community to take control of this metadata, because we've seen examples over the last couple of years where car companies are seeking to create a kind of common user experience around audio. And if the broadcasters aren't providing the metadata, in many cases, the car companies will go out and source supplemental information to put alongside or on top of broadcast audio content that is not necessarily always accurate or in the best interest of the broadcasters. So in some cases, they're taking that editorial control out of the hands of broadcasters. And what we've done collectively is built an ecosystem that puts that control back in the hands of broadcasters. So you'll get the right logo, you'll get the right metadata, you'll get the right partner image displayed with certain audio. It's very critical. The innovation is happening in the car, and car companies are taking steps to provide a common and consistent user experience. Broadcasters have the opportunity, but they have to act. And it's not a Herculean task to add metadata. It's just something that you have to be aware of, you have to make part of your production process, and you have to have your segment producers and your show producers focus on maybe not as important as the audio itself, but it's definitely a critical component of the whole user experience.
Yeah,
I think,
and the awareness. Getting awareness within the broadcasters' organizations throughout the production unit. Because I run a radio station for a long time, and it's not a normal thing for a producer to know the fact that there needs to be metadata for DAB, for example. That's not a number one interesting thing for that person to work with. So it's very important to make people aware of the entire production and also automate it, make it easy. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
I think the other thing I would add to that is once if you're a broadcaster and once you're providing your official metadata in the right way and the car company has access to it, the next key component is the user interface design itself, because even with access to the right metadata, there is still a magic to getting a really sophisticated yet simple and easy to use experience for radio. So there are some great guidelines available through WordDAB, but I think at the heart of that is collaboration. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to collaborate with the car manufacturers and create a kind of three-way partnership with the broadcasters, the car manufacturers, and us to try and build that really simple yet sophisticated user interface. We've all seen, I'm sure people listening to this would have seen examples in the past of quite poor car radios, where people have to go in and to find a station, you have to choose a multiplex, and no one knows what a multiplex is, right? But you still have to press that button. So hybrid radio gives the opportunity to create a much richer experience, but also one that's really simple and easy to use, so you can surface the right content really simply and easily. And that's kind of what we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, I also see a question: what is the benefit to focus on DAB+ if the entry barrier of IP and having a service running on gas or other platforms is so much easier and cheaper? It's an interesting question. It's a good question. The thing is that we've done a lot of research within EBU, within World DAB, also within BBC, ARD, other companies, and we all decided for DAB+, and it's with a reason. And I'm not the technical expert on, and I'm not the researcher, so I know that next week, for example, there will be speakers on this subject, but I know for a fact that DAB+ is much cheaper than FM. And it is a broader distribution field. For example, the FM networks in the Netherlands for commercial broadcasters are not covering the entire country. DAB+ does. So it gives a better level playing field. Next to that, DAB+ can communicate with 5G. It is a hybrid option, and it is your own ecosystem. It is a broadcaster's ecosystem. It is a place that we should cherish. Even though 15 or 20 years from now, there could be enough capacity to do without any FM or broadcast technique, might be so. But it is it's your own ecosystem with a button that says radio, and where you can put in other audio as well through your radio station. And if you have a heart for radio, then it is very important to keep your own ecosystem, your own distribution, and your own strategy that you can determine, and not rely on third party or tech giants only. So there are many reasons, not only these that I just mentioned, but perhaps Joe, I hear you say yes.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think it comes down to how do you really define easier and cheaper, and the control. I mean, we've seen a lot of car companies go for Android Automotive, and in some cases the full gas suite, but that comes at a cost. You have to surrender a lot of control, design control, access to data, et cetera. You're also then dealing with a fragmented app environment where you have to make sure your app gets discovered. And, you know, developing, and Laurence and I have good experience in developing apps for gas. It's not cheap, and it's not easy, and it's not free. And then when you are using that platform as a consumer, it's also not free. You know, you're paying for a data plan. You as a distributor are paying for access to the internet to push your content. In the case of the US, broadcasters are paying a much higher cost of content to the licensing organizations to distribute over IP. So it's a very complex message where you really need to understand all of the drivers underneath what's really embodied in that question. It's not one or the other. In fact, I would argue you want to be everywhere, but you always want to favor, at least for the foreseeable future, broadcast because of its efficiencies, because of the benefit to the consumer. And over time, I clearly acknowledge there will be this migration, but the broadcast industry has the opportunity to extend the time frame and the utility of broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, before we go on with the conversation, Laurence, I'm sorry, we are just entering the last 8 minutes or so of the conversation, so we can start, wrapping up. Not immediately, but just keep that in mind, and also inviting the audience to send in your questions. Go ahead, Laurence.
No, I was only going to add, I agree with everything these guys have said, and the reasons behind why it's important to keep DAB+ central. But just coming back to that point about the consumer, but also the way in which the car manufacturers are designing their systems. You know, we've had lots of conversation. Just as a starting point, I think every car manufacturer that we speak to still wants to keep control over a radio experience. They know that their customers value it, and they know they want to maintain that. And I think once you've made that decision, you're then thinking about how does it fit with the rest of the infotainment system that you're designing. And if you've got free-to-air broadcast that isn't using up additional data rates and so on, you want to keep that capacity for other things. As Joe said, you want to be everywhere, so there'll be other apps that are going to use that, and you want to free up space. In addition to having the robust coverage that broadcast has, it just provides the best experience alongside IP. And I think what will be interesting, one of the things we're looking at with interest is how the car manufacturers package up the data for the customer. So what we're seeing is, because the car will have its own SIM card and connectivity, obviously, and potentially an additional data package. And what seems to be happening is that the first 3 years or so may be bundled with the price of the car, and then at some point in the future, there'll be an additional cost to the consumer that they're going to see. And I think this is where it's important to use the benefits of the free-to-air broadcast system that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, Laurence, because you touched on that topic a little bit earlier about driver distraction. It's true that the screens are getting bigger. It's beautiful. It looks beautiful, but I don't drive. I always go in the passenger seat, and I want to be a second pair of eyes for the driver. And I wouldn't like the driver, in this case my husband or any member of my family, to just get distracted because the screen is too beautiful. Of course there are regulations, the cars must have alerts or anything, but how difficult, if it is difficult, is to make it compatible with the safety regulations.
Well, as you say, it's absolutely critical. And as the screens get bigger and more complex, I think having driver distraction front of mind when you're designing a world-class hybrid radio experience is absolutely crucial. Now, as you said, the car manufacturers themselves have really strict guidelines around this, and things like Android Automotive, which we've touched on, when we've sort of built the hybrid app that we've built for that, there are also guidelines, design guidelines around drive distraction that Google have placed within that as you're building it. So there's very clear guidance about that, and I think there's a big thing about when someone's driving. So the things that you are allowed to enable when someone is actually driving versus when the car is idle or not being driven. And so, for example, you don't want to be presenting hugely long lists of content when somebody is driving, because that's clearly going to be distracting. You want to limit the amount of content that you're allowed to show on the screen. And I'll just touch on two things. I know we're close to time. One is voice. I think voice is critical here. Using good quality voice search for radio, using good quality phonetics, which we provide, which helps the accuracy of search. It should be a match made in heaven for radio and avoid driver distraction. And the other one is about podcast on demand search with tens of thousands of brilliant radio podcasts. Thinking really carefully about how you present that to drivers is going to be crucial.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Laurence said. If you think about like using Amazon Alexa at home, the reason that your content is discoverable on that device is because of the metadata. So even though we're talking about a rich catalog of what may be visual, its real value is in search and discovery, which can absolutely be powered by voice engines. And I think you're going to see that come into the car in a very meaningful way.
We are in the very last 2 minutes of the session. So I invite you, Laurence, Joe, and Jacqueline, to wrap up. Any thoughts, anything that you might add for the conversation? And then we will just have to say goodbye, because as expected, the conversation really went flying.
Well,
it's always nice.
Yeah, go on, Jackie. You go.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's fine.
I was going to say very briefly, I think just pick on a few points. One is, I think collaboration is vital. You've heard about us, the three, these organisations collaborating, but working closely with the car manufacturers, keeping radio prominent and safe. And I think the one thing is building a common future vision for how radio is going to develop in the next 5, 10 years and beyond that we can plan against is critical.
Yeah, and I can only echo the collaboration between broadcasters is essential. If you if you want to stay strong, and we do want to stay strong as broadcasters, you need to collaborate, not only within your own country, step over your own shadow and collaborate with your competition.
Yeah,
it's quite funny.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think from our perspective, we have built the DTS AutoStage platform, which is deployed currently in 68 countries. And that's required us to step out of our own, US-centric view of the world, collaborate with broadcasters, organizations like Radioplayer and WorldApp. And it's been very successful in accelerating that vision of radio. The collaboration is key, and broadcasters, I really encourage you to lean into this opportunity, grab control of your metadata, and grab control of what broadcast can offer you in the car.
Thank you very much, Laurence Harrison, Joe D'Angelo, and Jacqueline Bierhorst. This has been a very, very entertaining and a very, of course, educational panel. So thank you very much again also for your audience, for your question, which Jacqueline already answered in the middle of the conversation. And now I invite you to have a break. Just take advantage of the networking, and when we are back, we are going to start with the innovation strategies of public and private radio panels. So don't miss it. I'm sorry. We'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you very much again.